Lake Michigan through there?
Yes.
It's way smaller than most people think it's going to be. I almost didn't laugh at that joke. That would have been the first time I didn't laugh at that horrible joke. I laugh at that one every day. Anyway, guys, what we actually have right here is Goshorn Lake. Goshorn Lake's a great example of the inland lakes that got made during the last ice age. Not sure what this was before those glaciers came through, but it would have had a really soft bottom, maybe a pond, maybe a swamp. When those glaciers came through here, it just grouted this little guy right out of the landscape. Last DNR survey of this lake told us it was 162 feet deep. From our last stop, we will see how small this is. To think how deep that water goes is really significant right here. Goshorn Lake right here is a very good pond for swimming, great pond for fishing. The way things kind of work here in West Michigan, we got that prevailing west wind that blows over the United States. That means for us, we got about an 85 mile wide lake right here. That dark blue water attracts that sunlight. That sun heats up the surface of that water, all 85 miles of it. That west wind would blow that warm surface water right up to our beaches here in West Michigan. The lake this morning was in the low 70s. It's been a little cold today, so it might have gotten a little bit cooler than that. But as long as that wind stays out of the west, it would stay in the 70s. It'll go up to the mid 70s, maybe even 80. If the wind switches and blows from the east for even 3 or 4 hours, it would blow all this warm surface water back out into the lake. It'd get replaced with very cold water from underneath. Lake Michigan would go from about 75 degrees right here on our beachfront to about 58 degrees. It happened about a week ago, and that lake dropped to about 58 degrees and was there for 4 or 5 days. Before that, before it started blowing that warm air water back up to us, so it is back up in the 70s now. However, if you do want a warmer spot to swim, or we get an east wind tonight, you want a warmer spot to come, Goshorn's going to be in the low to mid 80s, probably until mid-September. So it's a very comfortable place to come swimming here. They did catch a 7.5-foot lake sturgeon in this little guy back in the early 90s. Got to put him back in there. They're not allowed to keep those. So my guess is they got about a 15-foot lake sturgeon swimming around in there now. Long as you can't hold your breath and swim down 80 feet or so, you do not have much to worry about from that guy. He does not like to come up any more shallow than 80, 85 feet. So as long as you aren't swimming down that deep, you don't have anything to worry about from him. We do know Goshorn Lake used to be 2 to 3 times the size you see today, stretched all the way out into this dune basin. This entire area used to be covered with a white pine forest. This was all white pine trees as far as you could see. In the 1870s, they came through here and logged those pine trees off. When they did that, that west wind that blows that warm water up to our beaches very quickly blew away the topsoil that held all this sand in place. Once that topsoil was gone, this sand would blow or shift 10 to 12 feet a year. It would cover, bury, or fill in anything in its path, including the other half to 2/3 of this lake that we don't see anymore right behind me. This dune right behind me rolled that sand right over it, filled this lake in vertically as it went. Right now we could run as fast as we could down the side of that dune. We can dive right into that water when we get there. It goes down to about 80 feet deep within 4 or 5 feet of that bank right there. It is a ton of fun too. You just keep running right down there. Well, as long as that fish isn't there with his mouth open. He dove in there while he was open, and that could put a little damper on the afternoon. But otherwise, that little lake's a ton of fun to go play in, guys. Fred out here. Fred was tinkering with that fire hydrant all morning. I guess he finally dove head first into his job. Can't keep him from getting buried by his work out here. You guys see his lunchbox up there? He's brought the same thing for lunch every single day for 14 years. You know what he brings? Sandwich. Yep. You know his wife's name?
Sandy.
Sandy. You guys know his favorite movie? The Sandlot's one. If you guys were a little older, you'd remember the movie Dune. Dune was one of his favorite movies too. Yeah. You guys know his favorite song? It's Love Me Tender by Elvis. I can't believe nobody even guessed that. This many people. It's weird. You guys, maybe you haven't heard that song. It's worth checking out when you leave here. Elvis got a beautiful voice. You think I follow the rules?
Are you big on following the rules?
You might not like me very much after this. I like stopping, standing, and parking right here. Do what I want. So guys, after they came through here in the 1870s and logged off those white pine trees, it was not until the 1950s that the government decided they needed to do something to come out here and shore up some of this dune erosion that was going on. They got together with Michigan State University, which is our in-state agriculture school here in Michigan, decided they were going to plant this dune grass you guys see all over the place out here around you. This grass is called sea oat or marram grass. It is not native to Michigan. This grass would naturally be found in the coastal Carolina, coastal Georgia, northern Florida area of the country. In order for the fine folks at Michigan State to get this grass to grow here, they had to grow it in greenhouses until they had seedlings about this big. And then throughout the 1960s, they had student volunteers come out and hand plant this grass every 3 to 5 feet all up and down this lakeshore, hoping it would take root. One of the biggest problems they had in the 60s were finding that many college kids willing to come out and experiment with grass for the summer. I told you there was a couple funny jokes in here. So not all those volunteers spent the summer doing what they thought. But they came out here and they got this grass planted. If you guys look at that bank right there, you can see how far down the root structure of that grass extends. This grass has done an incredible job shoring these dunes up. They've gone from eroding that 10 to 12 feet a year to less than a 1/16 of an inch. Okay. At the end of the day, they hope this grass helps to reform a brand new layer of topsoil out here, and that this whole area will reforest like what we're going to see in a little while. No idea if it'll actually get that far or not. It's probably 150, 200, 250 years away from that if it does happen. But already on the leeward side of these dunes, we do start to see some trees, shrubs, and brush growing. So we do have hope that eventually this whole area will reforest. Did we get a waiver signed for the kids? Just checking here, guys, because we're trying to make it up to that 350-foot dune. These trucks don't always make it. What I find is if we start bogging down and we have the kids help push, it goes way smoother. If the adults do it and one of you guys throw your back out, your back's going to hurt for like 40 more years. One of the kids do it and throw their back out, it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops, and they're great.
Yeah.
So, as long as I know we got waiver signed, we'll be all set, guys. There he is, leading Fred. Leading Fred. have our first real good look at Lake Michigan, guys. Can you guys make out those couple white houses down there on the beach from here? For some reason this time of day they're really hard to see. Earlier in the day they like glow down there, but today it's kind of hard to see. But there are two white houses right down there on the beach. If you can see those houses, just to the left of those houses is where the Kalamazoo River meets Lake Michigan today. It used to be about a mile and a half further south of this. That would have been the site of Singapore, Michigan. Small town founded out here in 1836. City planners of Singapore wanted there to be a lake port on this side of the lake to rival the cities of Milwaukee and Chicago on the other side. This was supposed to be West Michigan's large metropolitan area right down here. For 35 years, business in Singapore was booming. They had thousands of residents living down there, which made it a pretty good sized community for the time. They had a couple sawmills, a couple churches, they had a 3-story hotel, Wildcat Bank, dozens and dozens and dozens of homes. Everything down there was going great right up until October 6, 1871. Does anybody know what happened that day? What do you got for me? It was the Chicago Fire. Did you know that, or did you know that from this ride before maybe? You read a book about it? Good job. We don't get a lot of people that do know that that was the Great Chicago Fire. Yes, take a bow. Wonderful. We still actually do have Fire Prevention Awareness Month in the month of October now because of that fire. They think Miss O'Leary's cow kicked a lantern over, right? And that's how that fire started. One thing led to another. The entire city of Chicago was engulfed in flames. That fire got so big, they think embers from that fire got into the jet stream, made the 150-mile journey from Chicago across Lake Michigan. They think embers from that fire landed in our towns of Fenville and Holland, the next towns east and north of here, and up by the Manistee National Forest. We lost hundreds of thousands of acres of woodland up there, and we lost both of those towns to fire within the next couple days. They do think they were all started from embers from the Chicago fire. After they got all of those fires under control, the only place they were in a big hurry to rebuild was the beautiful city of Chicago. To do that, they needed lumber. So they called these fine folks of Singapore who had all these white pine trees, and they asked them to start sending some of that wood over. They cut those trees down as fast as they could, they milled that lumber off, and they shipped those board feet right across this lake. Within 10 years, they had cut down too many trees. They had lost control of these dunes. That sand started pouring in faster than they could keep it out, and they had to abandon their town out here. Some of the more wealthy people actually floated their homes upriver to a little Indian village that used to be called the Flats. Today, that is the town of Saugatuck. Still does have 6-7 buildings in it from Singapore. Absolutely all that remains. Since 1971, the top of that 3-story hotel has been completely buried. It took Mother Nature exactly 100 years, but she completely erased Singapore from the face of the map. Where we're sitting today, guys, we can see about 28 miles into the lake. That is about as far as our eyes will let us see with the curvature of the earth and the way our eyes work. We can probably see just about every inch of that 28 miles right now. If we could see that full 80 to 85 miles all the way across this lake, we would see the fine folks of Racine, Wisconsin sitting directly across that lake looking right back here at us. If you guys ever do make it over to Racine, I can personally recommend trying the cheese curds. They are spectacular over there. Don't be alarmed when your teeth squeak. It's all part of it. It really freaks me out, guys, but it's all part of it. I had no idea. I thought I had to say dentist. I didn't even want to say anything, and my daughter's like, "Your teeth squeak?" I'm like, "Maybe." I thought she was talking to me, obviously. Weird.
I like your hair.
Hey, I lie to strangers too, brother. Guys, we are going to hang out here about 10 minutes. I'm going to set an alarm in my pocket for about 7 minutes. We're going to round back up and get up here in the truck. You guys want to take a couple pictures? Those logs laying down make great overlooks. You guys would rather run up and down the sand dunes. I know you guys were talking about that the whole way up here. Right over there is a real good spot for that, guys. Remember, every time you go down, though, you got to make it back up. There's no truck pickup down there. Downhill's fun, the uphill, not so much.
Might as well pretty much.
Few trees on the planet that can actually be buried and produce root structure. When you look at these straggly branches these branches here that don't have any.
You know, I had no idea that this grass was not natural. It's been here my entire life. We've never talked about it. I had no idea this. That fascinated me. I don't know if the other drivers talk about that as much as I do, because to me, I was like, wow, this grass didn't just naturally grow here.
That's amazing that somebody had a plan.
Had that, and they had to hand plant it, and you're like, what? It did. I mean, it took root, and it has grown. You know, now they got a couple areas, like by the Silver Lake State Park. They got a big area there where they combat this grass from moving in. They like draw lines, and anytime it kind of starts encroaching, they go off and kill it, and keep it out of the. So they have some open too. It can be. They also tried planting those green pine trees down there. Those are Austrian pines. That's actually the line for the state park. So that is on state land over there. But those Austrian pines were another thing that they planted out here with this grass to see if they could shore up some of that erosion. Those are a real aggressive tree though. They won't let any animal or any plants grow up to it. So they're gonna take those out eventually and replace that with this grass. Here we drive over with our grading trucks. No, we drive Since these cottonwoods can regenerate their root system, as that sand piles up and buries their branches, those branches will become new roots. They start growing down. The tree will continue to grow higher, growing new branches. As that sand piles up and buries those branches, those become roots, and so on. The reason we have this 350-foot dune is these 3 cottonwood trees and their root systems are anchoring down all 350 feet worth of sand. Since they've planted the dune grass out here in the 60s, we get less sand that comes up here than erodes away from here. So now we can look up at this tree and we can see those root structures exposed up there. That would have been 5 or 6 feet underground before those changed into roots. So we know we've lost 20, 25 feet of height off the top of this dune up here. One other really cool thing happens up here is the storms roll over Lake Michigan. We get lightning that strikes the top of these dunes all the time. You guys ever see that movie Sweet Home Alabama? Yeah. Yep, in that movie he buries the rebar and the lightning strikes it and he digs up like these $80,000 glass sculptures that are just amazing. That is not at all what happens. When the lightning strikes the sand, it'll fuse that sand together into a rock called a fulgurite. That lightning is hot enough, it does melt the sand down in the middle of those fulgurites to make raw glass in there. Most of the fulgurites we find are about that big. Not very spectacular. Well, there's other cool parts. There was a love story in there too, a little. Spoiler alert. But if that lightning, if that lightning does hit hot and sharp, it will make a very large fulgurite. We have a couple down in our lobby we have found that are about this big. When they do get this big, they have a nice sized piece of glass in it. The ones up here tend to be a dark green, dark blue, or blackish color. Some other mineral here in the sand is giving it that color. You want to take a look when we get back down there. They're right inside the lobby, just to the right of the door when you walk in, guys. Feel free. We are going to roll down out of here now, guys. A little more of this open dune to get through, but when we start getting in the wooded area, make sure hands and feet stay inside the truck, guys, okay? Every single time I think he's going to hit me. Did he just tap us? Is he touching? I'm filing an insurance report. 3 is leaving second stop, leaving second stop. So guys, the big difference between down here and out there, when they came through and strip lumbered this, they did it all at the exact same time. The biggest difference is that dune right there was already here in some capacity, nowhere near this size, but it was big enough back then to block the wind from blowing away the topsoil down here. Since this area never lost its topsoil, it was able to reforest right away. We have about 150 years worth of forest growth right here. Okay, this is what they hope that dune grass out there leads to. You know, in 150, 200 years, that'll reform a topsoil layer. The seeds and such will get carried out there from the birds, and eventually that whole area, hopefully, reforest to look just like this. You guys could all feel how it did get cooler coming down here. Even today, on a not very hot day, that's a very noticeable temperature change. So on those sweltering hot days, it's even more so. It could be 15, almost 20 degrees cooler down here than out there on some of those real hot days. So the animals all come down here to get out of that heat of the day. Very common. Most every trip we do see some wild turkeys. For about the past month and a half, there's been what they call a flock of them. Flock? Flock of turkeys?
Sure.
No, they call it a rafter of turkeys. That's what it is. So there's been a rafter of turkeys hanging out in that little meadow right outside of right when we leave the base, right there. They weren't there today. It's the first day I haven't seen them there yet at all. Usually there's 10 or 15 of them right there. So usually we do see turkey every trip. I would still think somewhere along the lines we'd probably see one out here today. This is kind of that magic hour that I kind of expect to start seeing some deer up and moving around too. It's kind of a cool today, so we actually saw a couple walking around earlier. Usually if it's hot, we don't see them much before now at all. They might still be bedded down too. If that's the case, when you drive by something you feel like is a tree laying down in the woods that picks its head up and takes a look at us, let me know about that, because none of these trees have heads. So if that happens, that might be one of those deer taking a peek at us. Besides the deer, the turkey, we do have skunks, rabbits, possums, raccoons, squirrels. We do have 4 different colored squirrels. If any of you are from the St. Louis area, where they only have gray squirrels apparently in the St. Louis area. Here we do have black ones, brown ones, a few red ones sprinkled in. Don't be alarmed if you see them, just squirrels. One lady really freaked out and thought we had a skunk chasing us. And that freaked me out because if we had a skunk chasing us, I want to get away from him. And I looked back and I was like, honey, that's a squirrel. She said, why is it black? I had no idea they had different colored squirrels in different parts of our country. No idea, but apparently they do. You've never seen a black one either? They're all over the place here. Don't get alarmed. I wonder if they like the water. Or if they're just like if Indiana made a law against them and so they don't go to Indiana. They're like, that's the state line. We got to stay here. I don't know. What else do we have? We do hear coyotes going through here at night. We have seen fox down here. We've seen signs of bobcat down here last fall. We've seen wolves in the area before in the winter, not usually this time of year, we wouldn't. There's been black bear reported in the area too. Nowhere around here recently. There was one reported in Holland about 2-3 weeks ago, but it makes the news if they see those. So you guys know if we did have a black bear here, I would have called in sick today. I wouldn't be driving you guys around out here. So if you guys come back in a couple of days and I'm not here, you might want to ask if there's been bear sightings for your sake. What else do we got down here? We do have some blue racer snakes down here too. The snakes are a little different than the rest of the animals since they're cold-blooded. They don't like to come down here to cool off. They'll actually find a wild grapevine, like that big one up there, going up that tree. They will crawl up into the branches of these trees and sun themselves up in those branches. It's a pretty cool thing to think about until you realize we got snakes in our trees and we still have gravity. So sometimes we do end up with snakes in buggies, guys. It happens from time to time. If we get a snake in this buggy, we do have a very firm rule about that. We may pass those snakes backwards or to either one of the sides. But we may never pass that snake forwards. And just so you guys all do now know the answer to that question, if a tree falls in the woods, it does make a sound. I'm not feeling good today. I need to go home. I never thought that could be Bigfoot back there. So guys, like I had said up there at the depot, man, make sure you guys keep your eyes peeled for wildlife through here. I am pretty good about seeing it. Can't see everything. If you guys do see anything, let me know. We'll slow down and take a look at that. Okay, guys?
Cool.
You said you want to see a bear?
No, I said I'd rather not. Get it over.
I think they'd be cute, and I'd be like, oh, let's go play with them.
I'd be driving the truck.
Then I'd have to walk all the way back in. look at this tree earlier this year, he said it could go at any second. So when I heard that tree fall, I was really worried it was this guy. Seriously, he was like, any second, could just go. Such a big, powerful tree, guys. Snake, but this one is it! Did I hit you with the corner of that? Oh, I thought I don't really feel bad about this, but if I'd have hit you with that one, I would feel bad about that. I think that's my favorite part of the ride. Today we saw a doe buck and a fawn out. This right here is the original office for the Dune Ride. Back in the 1950s, if you guys wanted to come on a ride, this is where you guys were coming. Right back here. You guys would have had to figure the back roads out off of Blue Star Highway all on your own to find the parking lot. Way more difficult before Google Maps told you how to get there. But if you guys would have found it, you could have parked right there. You would have walked up to the office and bought your tickets. Back then you would have had your choice between the scenic tour like we're doing right now, or back then they had a thrill ride. If you guys would have chosen that thrill ride, that was back before most of that grass had been planted or had taken root. So it was pretty wide open sand back there at the time. They had little hot rods that'd go ripping around out here at 70, 80 miles an hour. And they'd spin those little guys out, and they'd jump those guys, and they'd flip those things, and they'd roll those things. And people would get ejected, and they'd break their necks and their backs and their shoulders and their hips, and eventually fancy terms like liability started getting thrown around, and they had to do away with the thrill ride part of the rides. Back then we had over 100 dune rides in the United States. Today we roughly have 5. We do still have 2 here in the great state of Michigan. You have ourselves on the private property. The fine folks of the Mack Woods Dune Ride up on Silver Lake State Park. They are on state land, so they do have a few separate rules that they have to adhere to. The management up there requires everybody goes through a reference and background check before they hire them. They require everybody up there to have a valid Michigan driver's license. They're not willing to budge on any of that stuff. They need a chauffeur's endorsement before they can transport such beautiful cargo with them. Down here on the private property, guys, we just need those waivers you signed. And once you sign that, any idiot can drive you around out here. As that idiot, guys, thank you. It is tough for a man like me to find gainful employment in such a small town, but because so many of you are so willing to sign your name to a sheet of paper that you probably didn't read, even I got a job, guys. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
Guys, we're headed uphill from here. You guys want to do the big hill or the small hill?
Big.
Big hill. All right, guys. Anybody scared of heights? Nope. We're doing good then. Let's do the big hill. He is leaving Home Depot. Quick before we pull out of here, that is Goshorn Lake behind us again. That's that lake we saw the first stop I told you was 162 feet deep. So from here you can really see how small that is to think how deep that water goes. Back in front of us, that's that dune we were just walking around on. So from here you can really make out that those are the top branches of those trees like we were saying, right? I said like we were saying, I was the one saying it. I don't have to give myself credit as two people. I love this spot though because it gives me some credibility. Not everybody believes everything I tell them, but whenever I can point it out, I'm like, see? I love doing that. So I love this little spot. You guys want to hold on going down the hill? You guys want to go hands up? Hands up? It's harder to steer that way, but I'll try. Tree is leaving third stop. Leaving third stop. a couple of turkeys right through here. You guys see them? They got real cold in there. Can you guys see them sneaking through there? I knew they'd be around here somewhere. I was like, where could those guys have possibly gone? They don't move that quick. Oh yeah, a whole bunch of them down here. There goes a black squirrel too, I think. Welcome back, everybody. You guys are official Dune Ride survivors, guys. If you guys want to take a look at some of those fold rights right inside the door to the right, there is a logbook in there too. If you guys want to fill that out, you certainly may. Remember, if you had fun, my name is Frosty. If you wish this would have been more fun, use the name Brian. I don't think they know that's my first name. So, guys, thank you very much for joining us today. You guys have a great afternoon. We appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you very much. Enjoy your stay here in Saugatuck, guys.